And today is August 1st, 2017, at least for 2 more hours. It is RPGADay time, which, is August in general. And I didn't do it last year that I remember, but I want to do it this year. So here I am, and it is kind of rushed, partly because I forgot today was the first, partly because it's storming in my area, and I've got a panicked dog of somewhat unusual size here that is having issues with it because she thinks she hears thunder. Doesn't matter if she does or not. She panics when she thinks it's going to storm. It's definitely raining outside, so she has good cause. And she can probably hear thunder no matter where it is, even if it's inaudible to me or you, because her hearing is way, way, way on the far end, even for dogs. She's very sensitive to lots of different things. Now, today is the first, so that's the first day of RPGADay. And its particular question is, what RPG do you wish you were playing right now? Now, there are tons of RPGs I'd like to be playing. Maybe not right now, but currently. There's always one or two that are in my sights I don't own yet. There's always one or two that I've finally given up the ghost on and said, I don't really need to own this book anymore because it's never going to come up in the cycle of games that me and my game group play. And sometimes that's a mistake because a lot of times I will get rid of a game and then, someone will go, well, what happened to that game you were going to play? And I'm like, well, I wanted to play it. Dang it. If you just said something a week ago, but picking my favorite games is always difficult. Picking those that I want to play right now is always difficult. But I do have the one that I'm going to pick decided for tonight, and that would be Star Frontier. It's time to play a science fiction game for me. I am playing one online that is a Apocalypse World hack game called Impulse Drive. It's a great little game. It has obviously got inspirations from Star Wars. Star Frontiers, on the other hand, is its own unique thing. It's an old school game with percentile-based stats and skills. Characters started out fairly skilled, though you could not have pilot. You did not have space travel as something they considered important for the core game. Either that or they really wanted to sell you 2-box sets. I'm not sure which at that point in time. Because they didn't include a pilot as one of the starting skill sets you could pick. You could pick biology and robotechnology and various electronics. And other than that, the weakest skill in the book, not having space travel PSA or a pilot primary skill area or secondary skill area, was the weapon skill area, which is kind of odd for its particular times. That it gives you these weapons you can use, this many of them, and that's it. It doesn't particularly give you any other skills to go with those weapons, which is just a little bit odd, especially from the time period it's from. But it worked. I enjoyed it. It was a game that I ran a lot of and played a lot of when I got it many, many, many years ago. And here is my dog who decided to visit us. He just really wants to be cuddled and, make the storms go away, and I can do neither one of those. But anyway, back to Star Frontier. I still prefer it to a great many other science fiction games. It doesn't mean it's the best. It doesn't mean it's even the most original. It's just one of my favorites. I enjoy the alien races in the core book a great deal. I found them somewhat unique. And having read the kind of science fiction I read over the years, that's hard to do. It's hard for somebody to come up with an alien race and they go, ooh, that's really interesting and that's different. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't a novel out there that has something similar, or there isn't some other fiction or hypothesis that somebody has put forward for alien species that cover the aliens in Star Frontiers in some way, and somebody just went and took them and ran with them. It just means that in all my years of gaming and all my years of reading science fiction and fantasy, and believe me, science fiction was my biggest draw as a kid. It eventually faded away for fantasy a little bit later in life. But as a kid, my favorite, absolutely, because I wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to be a scientist so badly. I wanted to build laser pistols and laser rifles and all this stuff that the technology has not got to yet. And, and now I realize I'm kind of glad that I never became a scientist, because I might have actually been the one to develop those tools. And the problem with developing those particular tools, a laser pistol or a particle beam gun, is just a weapon. And outside of games, I'm not a very violent person. I'm pretty relaxed, pretty much a pacifist. I won't hurt people unless they hurt something or harm something that is very close to me, which pretty much means family, friends, which I generally consider the family I wasn't born to, and animals. Those are the three things that I will fight over: is people hurting animals, people hurting my family, people hurting my friends. Other than that, you know, I, you know, you can try and hurt me. I don't really care. I'll defend myself, but that's one of those things, is that it's just something I'm going to do. It's not something I think about or plan, and I'm kind of glad that I didn't become a weapons engineer or a physicist who dealt with, developing those particular technologies some of the time. I still wish I had gone into basically laser development, into optic physics, electromagnetic spectrum physics, um, simply because the tools we are making that are not weapons are fascinating and wonderful. Laser eye surgery, using lasers to destroy tumors, using lasers to break up kidney stones, or sonics to break up kidney stones, to use sonic waves. All that fascinates me. And I still am interested in it. But, it all goes back to my interest in science fiction and reading. And now I haven't read everything out there. It's simply impossible to read every science fiction book or every fantasy book, or even the majority of them out there from over the years. So that means that, yeah, I may have missed some inspiration for Star Frontiers Aliens that exists, but they're not as clear-cut derivations as some other science fiction games. That's one of the reasons I like Star Cluster. It's because it tends to stick with, here's a system for making aliens, or at least in Star Cluster 3, there were, here's your system for making aliens. And our default aliens in our default setting are variations of humans who were, brought to new planets and evolved slightly differently. They adjusted their legs, or they grew tails or something. But I like Star Cluster for that reason, because it assumes that, humanity is a basis for a lot of the aliens in that particular universe, taken from Earth and developed differently over the centuries, millennia, however many years it actually took in the games. But for aliens that are still playable and still understandable, Star Frontiers wins for me. And I know there are going to be a lot of people who go, but Traveler, but Traveler, and I like Traveler a great deal. I do. But I recognize where 2/3 of the alien species in Traveler came from in fiction, because the Aslan are fundamentally C.J. Cherry's Chernur. I mean, down to their culture and sociological patterns in many ways. they are definitely based on the Chinook. That's not a bad thing. I mean, there are a lot of other cat-like alien races in science fiction, and we can pick. We've got the Zinti, and we've got the Cathar, um, and we've got the Cations, and we've got and using some form of cat with a cat-like name is kind of getting boring. At least Adlin kind of makes sense. It's a Turkish word for lion, and so us calling them lions makes sense because they are lion-like. It makes sense that we use that, but that's the human name for them. And there are some really interesting alien races and travelers that are, I have no idea where they're drawn from, like the hybrids. Now, there's probably a book out there that has a hybrid-esque race in it, and that's okay. We're all drawing from similar inspirations when we develop games. I do a lot of research, especially with my games, to try and hit the keynotes of certain things. Like with my fantasy game, High Valor, I was trying to hit the idea of early to, early Iron Age, to late Iron Age folklore, and make that make sense as a fantasy game, not a historical fantasy game. And that took some interesting shuffling to make a fantasy game where these things were technically, our folklore that we have, that humans have in Earth, kind of fits, if you squint, the same kind of folklore that they would have in High Valley. The same kind of ideas. But there's definitely an explanation for it, rather than that's just how it is. There's an explanation for it. But I really liked Star Frontiers. Its biggest flaw was not having pilots in the core book originally, or space travel other than, hey, let's buy a ticket on a space boat, so to speak, and go from point A to point B. And that's, about its biggest problem. Its second biggest problem is high levels of hit points, relatively speaking, depending on your rolls, and fairly low damage weapons, especially melee weapons. I mean, let's be honest, in the real world, melee weapons are very effective. Without defensive, hitting somebody with an axe is, generally speaking, going to do a hideous amount of harm to them. But that's not true in Star Frontier. Hitting them with just a plain axe isn't necessarily going to, bother them too much. It's a game. It's supposed to be actiony. It's supposed to be space opera. So we can kind of admit that we took, that the writers and fans just sort of accepted that back then, because, that's how it was done. We didn't have hero points. We didn't have so many games where those ideas were spread. Or characters who are skilled enough to avoid getting hit, in games. We just simulated the ability to survive dangerous weapons with hit points, high health. In Star Frontiers, it's stamina, but it's the same thing. And those are its flaws, but it's otherwise a simple system, relatively little difficulty to run. The aliens make sense while being playable and are strange. And that's one of the reasons I would be interested in playing it right now, is I really enjoy Star Frontiers. It's not the only one I enjoy. In fact, there's tons and tons and tons and tons of books that I really enjoy in gaming. But that's the top one. So finally got this video shot. I'm going to stop here while we're mostly good. We only have a few distractions. So bear with me. These videos are going to be a little rough.